The sun rises over the peaceful streets of a small town in northern China. The sounds of daily life fill the air. Farmers plowing the fields, children playing in the streets, merchants calling out their wares. The calm of the morning is shattered by the distant sound of hoofs, gradually growing louder until the ground shakes beneath the arrival of the Mongol horde. The man stands frozen in fear as Mongol riders charge through the town, their arrows and swords cutting through the air. The town, once full of life, is now engulfed in flames. In the chaos, the man is captured and thrown to his knees. His heart racing, he looks up, his vision blurs as a Mongol soldier's shadow falls over him. And then, darkness. This was more than a raid, this was an invasion. It was a war of vengeance, one that would shape the course of history. How did the Mongols become an unstoppable war machine? And what did they learn from their campaigns in China that would lay the foundation for future conquests? The Mongols had always warred among themselves, but by 1206, Genghis Khan had done the unthinkable. He had united the Steppe. For the first time, the Mongols were not just a collection of warring tribes. They were a single force under one ruler. But peace among the Mongols did not mean peace for their neighbors. Genghis Khan had not forgotten the past. Decades earlier, the Jin dynasty had played a decisive role in Mongol politics, supporting his rivals and fueling the division that had nearly destroyed him. The Jin saw the Mongols as useful but expendable, mere pawns in their larger game of controlling the steppe. But now the balance of power had shifted. The Mongols were no longer weak, no longer divided, and they had not forgotten their humiliation. There were several more reasons to invade China. 1. Economic motivations. Northern China was a wealthy region with fertile land and prosperous cities. Control over these resources would bolster the Mongol economy and provide vital supplies for future military campaigns. Strategic expansion. The Mongol Empire was in a phase of aggressive expansion. Conquering northern China would not only extend their territory, but also establish a foothold in a significant and influential region, enhancing their power and prestige. Political unification. Genghis Khan's vision was to unify the Mongol tribes and create a centralized power. Conquering northern China would help in consolidating his authority and providing a common enemy that could unite the various Mongol factions. Military strategy. The Jin dynasty was seen as a significant military threat. By attacking and defeating them, Genghis Khan aimed to eliminate a powerful adversary and secure the Mongol south and eastern borders. Cultural and technological exchange. The conquest of northern China also provided opportunities for the Mongols to adopt and adapt various Chinese technologies, administrative practices, and cultural aspects which would ultimately benefit the Mongol Empire. Before turning to the Jin, however, Genghis Khan tested his growing empire against a smaller but formidable enemy, the Western Xia dynasty. The Mongols had raided their lands, starting in 1205. In 1209, Genghis Khan launched a full-scale invasion. He had chosen his first target, and it would be the proving ground for the Mongol war machine. For centuries, Mongol warfare had relied on mobility, speed and open field tactics. But conquering the steppe was one thing, China was another. Here the Mongols faced massive walled cities, fortifications that had stood for centuries, and defenders skilled in siege warfare. If the Mongols were to become an empire, they needed to evolve. The war against the Western Xia forced the Mongols to adapt. The Xia capital, Zongjing, was heavily fortified, and the Mongols, unfamiliar with siege tactics, found themselves at an impasse. But Genghis Khan was not one to retreat. He studied his enemy, learned from defectors, and adopted new tactics. One of the Mongols' greatest strengths was their ability to turn their enemy's knowledge against them. They captured Chinese engineers and siege specialists, forcing them to build the very weapons that would break their own cities. Soon the Mongols were using battering rams, catapults and siege towers, tools they would perfect in later campaigns. After a brutal siege, the Xias surrendered in 1210, But Genghis Khan was not satisfied. The lessons learned there would shape the future of Mongol warfare, and he knew his greatest challenge lay ahead: the Jin dynasty. The Mongols had always been outnumbered against the Xia, against the Jin, against nearly every enemy they would ever face. But time and time again they emerged victorious. The reason was simple: they fought differently. The Mongols did not rely on brute strength. They used deception, psychological warfare, and superior mobility to dismantle their enemies before the battle even began. They faked retreats to lure enemies into ambushes. They spread terror, sending survivors to warn others of the devastation that awaited them. They used an intricate communication system. Messengers on horsebacks could relay orders across kilometers, coordinating attacks with precision no other army could match. These tactics were tested again in 1211, when the Mongols launched a long-awaited invasion of the Jin dynasty. The Jin army outnumbered them, but it did not matter. At the Battle of Yehuling, the Mongols used their classic feigned retreat, drawing the Jin forces into a narrow pass. Once trapped, the Mongols encircled them, cutting off all escape routes. The Jin army was slaughtered. With Yehuling won, the road to the Jin heartland lay open. One by one their cities fell, and by 1230 Genghis Khan had reached the walls of Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing. Victory did not come without internal struggles. Even as the Mongols waged war in China, Genghis Khan had to maintain control over his own people. Loyalty was fragile, and power was never absolute. While Genghis Khan is often remembered for his military prowess and conquest, his political skills were just as crucial to his success. Uniting the Mongol tribes was no small feat. For years, the Mongols were divided, with various tribes constantly at odds. However, Genghis Khan understood that the key to a successful empire was unity, and he was willing to sacrifice tradition to achieve it. One of the most important aspects of Genghis Khan's internal politics was his policy of meritocracy. Unlike traditional Mongol customs, which often placed leadership in the hands of noble families, Genghis Khan promoted warriors based on merit rather than bloodlines. This meant that many of his closest generals and advisors were not of noble birth, but individuals who had proven themselves through loyalty and military success. This approach helped solidify his power and ensured that his army was made up of the most capable men. At the same time, Genghis Khan had to manage the delicate relationships between the various Mongol tribes. These tribes had long-standing rivalries and internal power struggles, which could have undermined his campaign efforts. Genghis Khan used a combination of diplomacy and force to ensure that loyalty to him came above all else. He established a strict code of loyalty and discipline, ensuring that his warriors followed orders and stayed unified, even in the face of adversity. Additionally, Genghis Khan's internal politics also involved rewarding loyalty with land and power. His approach was simple. Those who fought for him were rewarded, and those who betrayed him were punished severely. This created a sense of loyalty and trust among his generals and soldiers, motivating them to fight with exceptional determination and discipline. His ability to maintain internal unity allowed the Mongols to march across vast regions without the distractions of internal dissent, making them a formidable and cohesive fighting force. As these internal struggles played out, the war in China reached its climax. By 1215, the Mongols had transformed. What had begun as a war of vengeance had turned into a blueprint for conquest. The war in China taught them how to break walled cities, how to command massive campaigns, and how to govern vast territories. They learned the value of diplomacy, turning enemies against each other. They learned the power of terror, making surrender the only logical choice for their foes. But most of all, they learned that they were unstoppable. One of the greatest tests of the evolution came with the siege of Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing, the wealthy fortified capital of the Jin dynasty. This city was nothing like the nomadic camps and villages of the steppe, nor the smaller fortresses of the Xia. Zhongdu was one of the most heavily defended cities in China, protected by massive walls, deep moats and a well-supplied garrison. The Mongols would have to use every lesson they had learned to bring it down. Before attacking, Genghis Khan made sure the defenders knew what was coming. The Mongols had already devastated Jin cities to the south, and survivors had carried the news of their brutality. Refugees poured in to Zhongdu, filling its streets with fear and chaos. The Jin leaders had two choices: surrender or fight to the death. To pressure the city further, the Mongols cut off all escape routes. They allowed some prisoners to flee, but only after mutilating them, cutting off ears or noses, so that they could spread terror among the defenders. The Mongols understood that sometimes fear was a stronger weapon than any siege engine. The Mongols had entered China as cavalry warriors, but had quickly become siege masters. At Zhongdu, they used everything they had learned from their campaigns against the Xia and earlier Jin cities. Chinese engineers Mongols had recruited or captured Chinese and Khitan engineers during previous battles, forcing them to build siege weapons. By 1215, Mongol armies were equipped with catapults, battering rams, siege towers, and even early forms of gunpowder weapons. Encirclement strategy. Rather than launch reckless assaults, the Mongols surrounded Zhongdu, completely cutting off supply lines and starving the city. Coordinated attacks. Mongol forces attacked in shifts, ensuring their warriors were always fresh while the defenders grew exhausted. For months, Zhongdu held out. The defenders, though terrified, knew that surrender meant annihilation. The Mongols, however, were patient. They were not just raiders anymore, they were systematic conquerors. By the summer of 1215, the city had reached its breaking point. Starvation and disease spread to the population. Corpses piled in the streets, and defenders, once confident in their walls, had lost all hope. The Mongols launched their final assault, breaching the city's defenses and pouring into the streets. The slaughter was unlike anything China had seen before. The Mongols killed tens of thousands, looted the city and burned much of it to the ground. The Jin emperor had already fled, abandoning his people to their fate. The once great capital of the Jin dynasty had been erased from the map. With Zhongdu in ruins, the Mongols had perfected their method of conquest. Terror before the battle to weaken enemy morale, diplomatic manipulation to turn enemies against each other, superior mobility and siege tactics to overwhelm even the strongest defenses, complete annihilation of those who resisted, ensuring future enemies feared them. The Mongols had proven that no city was safe, no empire untouchable. From the siege of Zhongdu to the brutal raids across northern China, the Mongols learned and adapted at every turn, forging a war machine unlike anything the world had seen before. But it was not just their enemies, walls and armies that would fuel their wrath. Genghis Khan's fury was sparked by betrayal that would define his future campaigns. When the Khwarezmian Empire dishonored his emissaries and massacred a Mongol caravan, Genghis Khan's rage was undeniable. No mercy would be shown. This would not be the last time the Mongols would demonstrate the consequences of crossing them. In the next episode, we'll witness how Genghis Khan turned his fury into a weapon, and how the empires of the West would soon feel the force of the Mongol storm. They will know his fury. Until then, I'm the Chronicler, reminding you to like, subscribe and remember that history is written in mystery.